Mechanisms of evolution. Most essential learning competency explain the mechanisms that produce change in population from generation to generation. For learning objectives, you're going to describe evolution. Identify and describe the various mechanisms of evolution and understand the importance of mechanisms of evolution that brought about changes to the population. Before we proceed, let us describe some of the terminologies related to our lesson for today. The term population has been used with different meanings, but population in biology is defined as a group of individuals or organisms of the same species living and interbreeding within a given area. A species is a group of organisms that share a genetic heritage, are able to interbreed and to create offspring that are also fulfilled. Gene pool, it refers to the total number of genes of every individual in a population. Gene frequency or allele frequency is the frequency of occurrence or proportions of different alleles of a particular gene in a given population. Allele is a term coined to describe a specific copy of a gene. Genotype, it refers to the genetic material passed between generations, and the phenotype refers to the observable physical properties of an organism. These include the organism's appearance, development, and behavior. How would you describe evolution? Evolution is a process that results in changes in the genetic material of a population over time. Evolution reflects the adaptations of organisms to their changing environments and can result in altered genes, novel traits, and new species. What is the difference between microevolution and macroevolution? Microevolution happens on a small scale within a single population, while macroevolution happens on a scale that transcends the boundaries of a single species. Despite their differences, evolution at both of these levels relies on the same established mechanisms of evolutionary change, mutation, and migration. Although the term evolution is often used synonymously with natural selection, they are actually referring to different concepts. Evolution is an observable phenomenon in which gene frequencies change over time, but it does not explain why a population is undergoing evolution. This is where natural selection and other mechanisms come into play. They explain the why. There are 5 main mechanisms of evolution. 1. Natural selection, which occurs when population of organisms are subjected to the environment. The fittest creatures are more likely to survive and pass their genes to their offspring, producing a population that is better adapted to the environment. The genes of less fit individuals are less likely to be passed on to the next generation. The important selective force in natural selection is the environment. Darwin's grand idea of evolution by natural selection is relatively simple but often misunderstood. To find out how it works, imagine a population of beetles. There is variation in traits. For example, some beetles are green and some are brown. There is differential reproduction. Since the environment can support unlimited population growth, not all individuals can reproduce to their full potential. In this example, green beetles tend to get eaten by birds and chameleons and survive to reproduce less often than brown beetles do. There is heredity. The surviving brown beetles have brown baby beetles because this trait has a genetic basis. The end result, the more advantageous trait, brown coloration, which allows the beetle to have more offspring, becomes more common in the population. If this process continues, eventually all individuals in the population will be brown. Another mechanism for evolution is genetic drift, which can occur when a small group of individuals leaves a population and establishes a new one in a geographically isolated region. For example, when a small population of fish is placed in a lake, the fish population will evolve into one that is different from the original. The process may cause gene variants to disappear completely, thereby reducing genetic variability. The effect of genetic drift is larger in small populations and smaller in large populations. Another example is, imagine that in one generation, only brown beetles happen to have 4 offspring survive to reproduce. Several green beetles were killed when someone stepped on them and had no offspring. The next generation would have a few more brown beetles than the previous generation, but just by chance. This chance changes from generation to generation. Gene flow. It is also known as gene migration. It may occur during the migrations of individuals from one group or location to another. When the migrating individuals interbreed with the new population, they contribute their genes to the gene pool of the local population. Gene flow includes a lot of different kinds of events, such as pollen being blown to a new destination, people moving to new cities or countries, or when wind carries seeds far beyond the bounds of the parent plant population, or an animals may be driven off from a herd. If gene versions are carried to a population where those gene versions previously did not exist, gene flow can be a very important source of genetic variation. From the given diagram, the gene version for brown coloration moves from one population to another. Mutation is the ultimate source of genetic variation. If a new mutation occurs in the gametes or during embryonic development, then that mutation may be passed on to the next generation. Mutation is a change in DNA. An organism's DNA affects how it looks, how it behaves, and its physiology. So a change in an organism's DNA can cause changes in all aspects of its life. We have here example of a genetic mutations of the fruit fly, having sepia-eyed, bar-eyed, and wingless. Another example, we have a mutation could cause parents beetle with genes for bright green coloration who have offspring with a gene for brown coloration. That would make genes for brown coloration more frequent in the population than they were before the mutation. Artificial selection. Long before Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, farmers and breeders were using the idea of selection to cause major changes in the features of their plants and animals over the course of decades. Farmers and breeders allowed only the plants and animals with desirable characteristics to reproduce, causing the evolution of farm stock. This process is also called selective breeding because people, instead of nature, select which organisms get to reproduce. Here are some examples of illustration wherein farmers have cultivated numerous popular crops from the wild mustard by artificially selecting for certain attributes. Charles Darwin used artificial selection as a springboard to introduce and support the theory of natural selection in animal breeding. Techniques such as inbreeding, line breeding, and outposting are utilized. In plant breeding, similar methods are used. Charles Darwin discussed how selective breeding had been successful in producing change over time in his 1859 book on the origin of...
What exactly is evolution? In biology, the theory of evolution doesn't tell us exactly how life began on Earth, but it helps us understand how life, once it came into existence, diversified into the many incredible forms we see now and in the fossil record. It also helps us make sense of the way in which modern creatures continue to adapt and change today. In biology, evolution can be defined as any change in the heritable traits. Those are physical traits like fur color in mice, spots on the wings of butterflies, or instinctive behaviors like the way that dogs greet their friends with a sniff, within a population across generations. This definition can be a bit confusing, so let's see how it works. All healthy living things, from single-celled amoebas to flowers to dolphins, are capable of reproduction. We have children, we make copies of ourselves. We do this by duplicating our DNA and passing that DNA on to future generations. DNA is a chain-like chemical stored inside each one of your cells, which tells them how to grow and function. Your DNA contains coded information on how to build you. The information in your DNA is different than that of, say, a daffodil's DNA, which is why you look and function differently than a daffodil. The information in your DNA is slightly different than that of Elvis Presley, which is one of many reasons you don't look or act quite like he did. Single-celled amoebas and other simple creatures reproduce by copying their DNA inside their guts, moving both copies to either side of their body, splitting in two right down the middle, and then growing back to full size. If all goes well, the two new amoebas will be exact copies of each other, but in nature, things aren't always perfect. When DNA is being copied, errors can occur which modify the DNA code. This is what we call a DNA mutation. These mutations, which happen completely on accident and randomly to any part of a DNA strand, can produce variation in the body shape and function of the creature who inherits the modified DNA. In this case, our new little friend has an arm that stretches extra long. If he survives long enough to grow and reproduce, that extra stretchy arm, which is now coded for in his DNA, will be passed on to his children. Evolution. Any change in the heritable traits within a population across generations has officially occurred. Reproduction for dolphins and badgers and people is a little more complicated. We have to find ourselves a partner. When two badgers get together and, fall in love, a sperm cell from the father, which contains a copy of half of his DNA, only half, combines with the egg cell of the mother, which contains half a copy of her DNA. The result is a brand new cell with a complete set of DNA instructions, all the information needed to divide and grow up into a brand new badger. The new child matures to be similar to her parents, but also unique because she develops some traits from her mother's DNA and some from her father. Her new combination of traits can be passed on to her children, and again, evolution. Any change in the heritable traits within a population across generations has officially occurred. Besides the unique recombination of her parents' traits, she might also have developed some completely new traits of her own due to DNA mutations. Maybe extra hairy ears, for example. If she survives long enough to have kids, her DNA will combine with the DNA of her partner, and she'll pass on those extra hairy ears to at least some of her children. Again, evolution has officially occurred. So there you have it. Evolution is really pretty simple. Scientists and normal folks everywhere witness evolution happening all the time. Small changes like the ones we've seen here can add up over multiple generations to create dramatic changes. If you were to go back in time just a few thousand years, you'd find that all dogs, for example, originally evolved from an ancestral group of gray wolves. The evolution of those wolves from generation to generation was guided by humans. People were selecting wolves with the traits they liked, letting them breed, and then only keeping the puppies with the most desirable traits. As time went on, different breeders preferred dogs with different features. Some selected for large size, some for small size, some for brains, others for brawn. Today, wolves have branched out into hundreds of breeds, very few of which look and behave much like their ancestors. A massive amount of observable evidence from many different fields such as genetics, chemistry, paleontology, and mathematics overwhelmingly suggests that just like all dogs share a common ancestor, all living things, me, you, pufferfish, banana trees, if you go back far enough, also share a common ancestor. We are literally related. We don't know what the first life form was or exactly how it came to be, but the simple process of reproduction with variation over billions of years looks to be responsible for all the diversity of life we see today. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, hold on here. Isn't evolution random? To do something functional like turn a wolf into an adorable mini poodle, random evolution had to be carefully guided by an intelligent dog breeder. Researchers claim that all mammals evolved from an ancient shrew-like creature. But the difference between a shrew and an elephant is far greater than that of a wolf and a poodle. Who guided that process? Who was the breeder? In the mid-1800s, two men, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, independently discovered that a breeder is not necessarily needed. There is another force capable of guiding random evolution to produce order and complex function. They called it natural selection, which happens to be the entire topic of our next video. But before you move on, let's recap what we've learned so far. Biological evolution is any change in the heritable traits within a population across generations. All healthy living things can make copies of themselves, but they do so imperfectly. Small variations can add up over generations to create dramatic differences in the body form and function of living creatures. Evidence overwhelmingly suggests that all life on Earth is related. So remember, next time you invite family and friends over for a holiday feast, you're actually just inviting family. That includes the turkey and the pumpkin.
For your group activity, you're going to determine the action of genetic drift and natural selection. The key difference between these two mechanisms, which can be difficult to get a handle on without direct experimentation, is that natural selection privileges some individuals over others on the basis of their biological traits, while genetic drift privileges some individuals over others with no regard to their biological traits. So we have here the data table for genetic drift experiment, a summary of allele frequency of black beetles. Knowing genetic drift, it happens just by chance, and this chance changes from generation to generation. So we have the first and second round of trials. Another table that we have is the summary of gene frequency of black beetles for natural selection experiment. Knowing natural selection, it is more likely to survive in a given environment. Such environment, we have the green forest and black dirt. For your guide questions, 1. Compare the results from the genetic drift experiments to the natural selection experiments. Are there any clear differences in results? If so, what is the reason for the differences? 2. In cases where one of the colors of beetle was eliminated, how could the allele for this color re-enter the population? Which forces mechanism of evolution would be required? 3. Is the outcome of genetic drift or natural selection more predictable? How might these different mechanisms of evolutionary change relate to functional trait of organisms?